Hey everybody, hello. Much more interesting background this time. I'm like literally sitting on the floor and this stuff sitting on my windowsill. But I thought it was a little more interesting to look at than the blank vanilla wall that I have some fun ideas for. So hopefully soon I will have a nice live streaming backdrop that is actually interesting. So today we are going to talk about what does homeschooling actually look like on a daily basis. You wake up in the morning and then what? Now, obviously, there are so many factors, right, that are going to affect how this looks. The number of kids that you have, the ages of your children, what kind of curriculum you're using, what your methodology is, what kind of outside classes you might be taking. And again, remember, these are all things that I can help you figure out with coaching. So talk to me if you'd like to do that or learn more about that. So all I can really do is share what homeschooling has looked like for me, for my family. And as I mentioned yesterday, homeschooling has looked very different almost every year that we've done it. It's never looked the way that I have ever wanted it to look exactly. But what I'm going to do for this video is tell you about the schedule that we had for the 2 years, the two most consistent years that we have had, and the 2 years that were the most homeschooly, if that makes sense. So I have two daughters. They're 2.5 years apart. During the period that I'm going to describe, they were like 8 and 10-ish, somewhere around there. And my younger daughter has dyslexia, so that obviously also changes the way that certain things look for us. And my older daughter, very, very independent, has always wanted to kind of do her own thing, work her own way. And so you'll notice that a lot of what I do, it kind of allowed her to have that freedom. So we would wake up in the morning. I would kind of give my girls an incentive. I told them if they were up before 8 o'clock, then they would be able to be on screens. So they could watch video or something like that, play a video game or something if they wanted to. So if they were up by 8 o'clock, they could do that. However, if they woke up after 8 o'clock, no screens until the afternoon. From 8 to 9, we would have breakfast, getting ready. I had checklists that I had for each of them that I laminated. Okay, I got a laminator from Costco, like, I don't know, oh gosh, now that I think about it, quite a number of years ago. Best investment ever, because you can make anything dry erase, right? So worksheets or handwriting practice, things that they're going to keep doing over and over, or if you have lots of children, or multiple children anyway, and you want to be able to use the same materials again later, you can laminate them and then you can use them for ages, right? So I had these little like half sheet checklists for them every day, and it would list all the things that they needed to do. And it was things like, you know, make your bed, brush your teeth, have breakfast, get dressed. Although the get dressed thing, honestly, I was never all that like, you know, you have to do unless we're going out for a class or something, because hey, we homeschool and I know I'm far more comfortable in my pajamas. So I wasn't always real firm on the getting dressed part. Everybody has chores in our house, and we have a chore chart. We have a place downstairs. It's still kind of evolving, but we call it our Moro Mission Control. And we have one of those giant desk calendars that we keep our schedule on. There's a cork board. We keep all sorts of things on there. We always have our chore chart up there. So the chore chart, every day I would change it up. So it wasn't like this child always does this chore, because that gets boring. So, and plus that way they can rotate the chores that they don't like. And it's not like I have to do this awful chore for the whole year. So they would have to do whatever their chore was for the day. And the idea was everything should be done by 9. We would start school at 9. Anything that they didn't finish before 9, they were going to have to finish after school was over. So there was some incentive there. Like nobody wants to do like, you know, a bunch of thinking and work and they have to go do chores, right? So there was some incentive there. If I get my chores done, then I don't have to do them when school's over and I have all this free time. So after chores were done at 9 o'clock, we would start. And because my girls are only 2.5 years apart, I was able to do a lot of things together with both of them. So that would save some time and some material costs, because I could just buy one curriculum to use for both. So we would do Bible, history, grammar, and read aloud together, the four of us, or the three of us. So those 4 things we would do together. we have a program that our girls were in for a while called Awana, which is like a kids Bible study kind of thing. And they would memorize Bible scripture for that. And so we would incorporate that. That was always part of our Bible studying that we would do. Oh, cursive, that was another thing. And I would work that in with different things. They would write their Bible verse that they were memorizing in cursive every day. So we would do Bible. And usually we do Bible and grammar. And then we would take a break. And then we would come back and we would do history. And after history, we would do read aloud. And by that time, we'd take another break. And then after that break, that was when things would diverge. So Abby, Little Miss Independent, right? I would have all of her work figured out for her, and I'd create a checklist for her. And so she would do her math and her Awana. Awana was actually separate because we had a Bible curriculum, and then we'd also do Awana, and they were in different levels in Awana, so they were doing different things. So we would do Bible, and then after those other subjects, she would do science, because she was doing a different science at the time as well, and Awana, and reading, like her actually reading to herself, and math, because those were the things that were different for both of them. So I would give her a checklist, I'd give her the work, and I would literally just hand it to her and say, okay, here you go. And she needed to be responsible for getting that done. And when she was done, she had to bring it to me so that I could check it. And then I would work on those things with my younger daughter, who still needed that one-on-one time and assistance. And usually what we would do is we would work for, if she was staying on task, it was usually about 15 minutes for each subject. And we'd take frequent breaks because she's also very kinesthetic. She has a lot of energy. She's very physical, just likes to move. This is the girl that she just joined a homeschool rock climbing group. We have a rock climbing place about 20 minutes from here, and they have two homeschool rec teams. And so we'll go to that for 2 hours. She does an hour with the class and then an hour of free time, or a free climb. And then we'll be coming home and she'll say, hey, can we stop at the park? And I'm like, my arms hurt from watching you climb and you want to go to the park? So she's very, very physical. So we had to do short lessons because her sitting at a desk just was not her thing. And we would look for different ways we could do that. We would do math facts in chalk on the driveway. So this would kill my back, but I would basically kind of squat down and I'd write the math facts. So 2 times 3, 3 times 5, 2 times 9, whatever, along the edge of the driveway, and she would follow behind me and answer them. And the idea was that she needed to try to keep up with me. And so that was how we would work on her memorization and kind of her speed with her math facts and things like that. And it allowed us to get outside, which she loves. It allowed her to do something physical because she's hopping from, problem to problem. It was just more engaging for her that way than a piece of paper. We would still have to do, paper lessons, and we would do them, but I'd switch it up. I'd let her do them on the window, sometimes with a whiteboard marker. We actually had, at this period of time, my older daughter particularly was really craving a very conventional approach to school. And so we literally turned our front room in our downstairs in the house into a school room. We had a whiteboard mounted on the wall. They had lockers. We got desks. So it was very, very schooly the way that they wanted it to be. So we would do math on the whiteboard all the time. And so all of that would usually take us maybe up to lunch. So, like I said, we'd start at 9. We'd usually have lunch at around noon. So it was about 3 hours, but I would say we had probably an hour's worth of breaks and transition time in there too. So it wasn't 3 solid hours of work. And obviously for my older daughter, there was more for her to do just because her lessons were a little longer because she was a little older. But for the most part, that was how our school schedule looked. And then we'd have lunch. Whatever they didn't finish by lunch, they had to finish after lunch before they could have free time. And then after they were done with all those things, it was free time. Go play, go do whatever you're going to do. Do your chores. If you hadn't done those yet, finish your checklist if you hadn't done that yet. But as somebody had mentioned when I posted the live stream teaser earlier today, somebody had asked what do we do? Like, I have trouble filling the time. Like, we finish everything by noon, and then what do we do? Free time, baby. Just free time. Like, when you think back to your childhood, and I don't know, maybe your childhood is very different from mine, but I think back to summers as a child. You had that period of boredom, kind of after like the initial excitement that it was summer kind of wore off. There were those days where you're like, oh, there's nothing to do. But after a while, your imagination would kick in and your creativity would kick in. And that's when you would do like all these, you do like the lemonade stands. Or one year, I lived in a neighborhood full of kids. We started a neighborhood newspaper and we ran a newspaper for the summer. We had these very elaborate imaginary play, like soap operas practically with, it was mostly girls. In fact, it was all girls except for my poor brother, in our neighborhood. And we all had Cabbage Patch Kid dolls because this was back in the days of when that was all new. And so we would pretend that since there were no boys, we would pretend we were all single working mothers, all rooming together. And we like make up these crazy stories and all this stuff. But I mean, your imagination kicked in and you would play. And so often these days, our kids' lives are so jam-packed and scheduled, they have no time to just play, to use their imagination, to write stories and act them out, or experiment with things, or build crazy stuff with all their Legos, or whatever. It is totally okay to not jam-pack their schedule full of stuff. You don't have to have something assigned to every time slot of the day. Let them go do their thing. Give them that independence, encourage that independence, encourage them to think of other things to do, to find something to fill that time. And yes, you can look for classes, and that was something that we did add in one of those years. There's a kind of an extracurricular / academic group of classes that meets not far from here. And so Abby started taking science for that. And so that was just one day a week. So on Wednesdays, I think it was, our schedule was kind of crazy because we would have to go bring her to that. And so PJ, my younger daughter, she and I would bring her work. We would drop Abby off at class. We would hang out in the car. We'd put music on, and we'd sometimes like sit in the trunk. We'd like put the seats down so that we had all this space, and she would do her schoolwork back there. And then sometimes we would go to the library after that with some friends of ours who also were taking these classes. And we would go and everyone would have their schoolwork, but you were kind of, doing your schoolwork with your friends. And even though everybody was working on something different because everyone had different curriculum, although they had the science class in common, so they would often do their science assignments together. So that was kind of fun. So Wednesdays were a little bit crazy. And one of the great things about homeschooling, and I've talked about this before, is the fact that homeschooling doesn't have to take all day, right? So, and lots of homeschoolers will only homeschool for 4 days a week, because if you don't mind having it take kind of all day, you can put 5 days worth of work into 4 days worth of actually working. And so Wednesdays were kind of like our free-for-all day. So I wasn't all that concerned if a lot of stuff didn't get done. I was glad that they were spending time with their friends, that they got to see their friends. I got to see my friend because their mom and I were good friends and we didn't get to see each other very often. So this weekly thing was kind of like our play date. So I was less concerned about, are you getting your work done? And more concerned with them just being able to hang out with their friends and yes, get some work done too. But, I didn't really mind if they tended to just kind of hang out with each other. That was fine. Because we had 4 other days during the week that we could kind of buckle down and do the things that I wanted to make sure that we got through. And then we had things in the evenings, and they were both in sports at the time, doing various things. But I know it sounds like pretty straightforward and simple. Like it's not that complicated of a schedule, but it really wasn't. It doesn't need to be a complicated thing, right? When you are homeschooling, you open the books the next day, you pick up where you left off, you work for a little while, you stop when you're bored or when you get to a good stopping point, or when you decide you just feel like being done, and then you take a break and then you come back and you work some more. It doesn't have to be this real strict, spend 20 minutes on this, spend 30 minutes on this. Unless, of course, caveat, your state requires that you spend a certain amount of time. It's rarely a certain amount of time on each subject. It's usually that you have to spend like 600 hours over the course of your school year on your core classes or something like that. You can do that. That's not hard. So when you think about, let me just say a quick piece about trying to figure out a schedule that works for your family. You definitely want to look for ways to help your kids be independent, because frankly, that's just a life skill. Okay. Like, they need to learn to work independently. But of course, working with them on things, particularly if you can group a bunch of them together and work on those things, all at once, get everybody through this particular thing or that particular thing. Science and history are great for working with multiple ages because they're not skill-based subjects, right? There aren't like history skills other than reading and thinking critically. And it's the same thing for science, right? It's reading and thinking critically. Now, obviously, there are some, bodies of science like chemistry and biology and things that can get a little more, a little meatier, and you do have to be a little older to really comprehend them. But, studying things like geology or astronomy or, physiology, kids can do that at any age. So what you can do, even if you had like a first grader, a fifth grader, and an eighth grader, you can often find, well, I shouldn't say often. Let me take that back. You can probably take a curriculum and gear it towards your oldest child, and then pick and choose from the assignment what part you want the younger child to do and then the youngest child to do. And honestly, this is just my personal philosophy, but I believe that up until high school, things with history and science are really just about just exposing them to stuff. It's about showing them what's out there in the world, and less about making them memorize dates and people and events and terminology and all these, systems and cycles and blah, blah, blah. If you have a child that's really interested in a particular subject, then take advantage of that. And yes, absolutely, talk them through those kinds of things and teach them those kinds of things, because their mind is really open to it. But if you have a child, particularly with history can often be quite dry for a lot of kids, right? So looking for ways to make it fun, acting things out. Okay, you're going to be Napoleon. You're going to be, whoever. Or watching videos about things, reading books. Okay, Magic Treehouse, fantastic for history. Like, that's all it is history, practically. There's some sciencey kind of stuff in there too, but reading books like that, that's the beauty of that kind of thing, is that it's a really fun way to learn about real stuff, right? So you can look for fun ways that you can take one topic and just approach it in different ways for each child. And sometimes you can even read the same text, but just have, for the work that they do after that, maybe they're going to answer maybe your older child is going to write a 5-paragraph essay comparing the person that you just read about to some other person that you read about earlier in the year. Maybe your middle child then is going to take a blank map and map out stuff from that particular lesson. And with your youngest child, maybe you're just doing a timeline and they draw a picture that represents the thing that you just learned about and they put it on their timeline. That's 3 totally legitimate ways to approach the same lesson. So just let yourself get creative and think about, okay, what do I want each child to really get out of this? What does my first grader really need to pick up and really need, what do I really need them to know about, whoever or whatever event, or fill in the blank, right? Versus what do I want my 5th grader to know? They're older, they're starting to be able to think a little more abstractly, and you can start digging down a little bit more into like cause and effect type stuff and comparing different things. And then with your older child, obviously critical thinking, you want deeper comprehension. So you're going to do more, talking about themes that they see in history, or, comparing, contrasting different things, or drawing their own conclusions from whatever. I mean, there's lots of different lots of different things you can do at each age, just depending on what your values are. And again, that's why it is so important before you go looking at curriculum to think through what do I believe about education? Because there are people who would say, oh, no. You don't just expose them to stuff up until in high school. They need to be memorizing things because XYZ, they've got perfectly good reasons for that. That's fine. I don't agree, but that's my philosophy. So you need to know what your philosophy is, what you believe, why you have those values, what it is that you want your child to know and why. And then you need to figure out what is the methodology that I'm going to use. How am I going to, now that I've got this idea of what I want their education to look like, how am I actually going to implement that? And that's what your methodology does. It creates the framework in which you now go through and teach this stuff. And then the curriculum is just the materials you use to help you teach. But until you've done all of that work kind of at the front end to figure all those things out, it's really hard to just go pick the curriculum, right? So, again, when you are figuring out your schedule, you're looking at what are the ages that I'm dealing with? What do I need for each of them to do? How can I get them to work independently? And remember too, that it doesn't have to take all day, and that the younger they are, the less they need to do. So, your first grader shouldn't be doing more than an hour, I would say, an hour of work a day, unless they want to do more. So when you think of it that way, if you can overlap some lessons with your older children, with that first grader, they, it might just be like math and reading that you have to take 10 minutes with them for each of those, go over that, and then you're done with them. 20 minutes and you're done teaching one child already, because they also did history and science or whatever with the older children. And now he's done. And now you maybe have some activities kind of set up for him to keep him busy so that he's not coming to you, Mom, I'm bored, while you're trying to teach the other kids. And also looking for, this is when activities that you do in the community with other homeschoolers can be really handy. Because you can go to those things and not every child necessarily has to engage. Maybe, it's so-and-so's art class, but we're all going to go because while he's in art, we are going to work on whatever. So, you can kind of work things in that way too, so that you've got something for this child to do, and they're getting some, extracurricular stuff going on also, and it's keeping them busy. And you have more time that you can work with these kids who kind of need more of your attention on this particular subject or what have you. And then remember too, the older they get and the more independent they get, by the time they're in high school, chances are you're doing very little instruction. So you're not having to figure out all that much of a schedule, because you're pretty much just saying, okay, here you go. Here's what you need to do this week. Finish it by Friday and let them do their thing. And obviously you may have to come alongside, help them plan, help them figure out how to make a schedule. What do you want to work on first? You've got this to do by Friday, so that means that you need to, break this down somehow. How do you want to do that? Do you want to do all your math in one day? Monday, math day. Get all the math done. Tuesday, science day. Do all your science on Tuesday. You can do that. Or you can do a little bit every day. Help them figure out what works for them. But really, in terms of the time that you're spending teaching them, chances are it's going to be very little. So it's really kind of the Middle Ages, from like second grade up through like 5th or 6th grade, that you're going to be the most, you're going to be spending the most time and be the most engaged. Younger than that, you're very engaged because they can't read for comprehension yet, but you're not doing very much with them, typically, okay? The older end of that, 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade, they're getting more and more independent. So you're doing a little bit with them, but you're not as engaged. So it's kind of that middle age range where the time that you spend and the level of engagement are both the highest. And so those are the years that it can be the most difficult to figure out the schedule. But it's okay for it to keep changing. Lisa said, my schedule is different every day. Our schedule was different every day. For the most part, the schedule that I just described was what our schedule was. But not always. I mean, we had class, we would have play dates, like standing play dates. We got together every Tuesday with his family or whatever. We had things to kind of work around. And when things start getting really crazy and you have a crazy schedule, my focus always goes to math and reading. Like those were always my two non-negotiables. We had to do those every day. I was far less concerned about hitting history and science every day. Not because those are not important subjects, but because you cycle back to those, right? Like you didn't study American history just once. You studied it in 5th grade. You studied it in 8th grade. You studied it probably junior year, right? So you're hitting everything multiple times in history. Typically with science, same thing. You're usually going a little deeper with what you're doing with it as you go on. But it's not like this is going to be the only time that you see it. You know, you're going to cycle back to those with later grades, later ages. But obviously math skills build and reading skills build and writing skills too. That's another thing I should have thrown in there. In fact, I think I forgot to mention writing earlier. That was one of the things that we actually did at the same level with both of them, which might sound weird since they were such different ages. But the way it worked out with what we had been working on, it just kind of fell that way. And it actually worked really well. I was going somewhere. Oh, cycling back. So yeah, so you don't necessarily have to teach every single subject every day. On those days where you're like, oh my gosh, we have so much going on, I don't know how we're going to get everything in. Don't try to get everything in. Prioritize. What are your values? What things are you most concerned with? And focus on those first. If you get those done and you find you have extra time, yay, then go ahead and do it. And if you don't, no guilt. Don't freak out over it. And remember that you can always make things up later. You can always do stuff later. Again, especially with history and science, that you're usually reading things like reading a textbook or reading a book or whatever. You can make that bedtime reading. Everybody snuggle up on the bed, and I'm going to read a chapter out of, the Mystery of History or Story of the World or whatever curriculum you're using. Or historical fiction. Best way to teach history, historical fiction. And that's like family time, and it's winding down time. Who doesn't love a bedtime story, right? But you're doing school. You're doing it at 8:30 or 9 o'clock at night or whatever, but that doesn't matter, right? You do it when it fits in your schedule. And then, weekends, maybe you have experiment Saturday where you're going to do all the experiments from this lesson, do them all in one day. So then, you're not having to drag everything out every week or whatever. So get creative. You don't have to do the same schedule every day. You don't have to do every subject every day. You don't have to do school from 9 to 3. You don't even have to do school Monday through Friday. Whatever fits for your schedule is totally fine. You can do everything at night. You could do everything on the weekends. You could unschool and do everything just through life. You don't even have curriculum. So lots and lots and lots of different ways to do it. Hopefully, though, hearing kind of one example of what it looked like, and then hearing some different ways that you can be creative about things and kind of change things up, that will hopefully help you to think about your own schedule in different ways and think about what's really going to work best for us and what are my priorities. What am I most concerned about covering every day? That is it. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope that was helpful. And I guess that's it. Don't forget, this week only, super, super, super big discount on my coaching. So if you are wishing that you had someone to hold your hand through this transition into homeschooling, helped you figure out your philosophy, the methodology, how to choose curriculum, how to structure your day, all that different kind of stuff, that's exactly what my coaching is. So don't forget to schedule your homeschool exploration call so we can talk about that, see if that's going to be a good fit for you so you can take advantage of the super deep discount that I'm offering this week only. All right? Hope you all have a great night, and I will talk to you later. Bye.